Hey, what's up guys? My name is Ramon, and in this video we're going to take a look at an AI website lead generation chatbot that I built for a med spa business. So let's jump into it. Let's first take a look at what problem we're trying to solve. So if I go over to this website right here, so this is a med spa website. Now let's imagine for a sec that I'm here because I have a double chin, and I'm trying to find out whether I can get that handled through this med spa. Now looking at this website, there's a lot going on here, but let's pretend that I've never been to a med spa before. I don't know anything about med spas. I don't know what terminology they use or how they communicate to each other. So if I go over to services here, there's a whole bunch of lingo here, and I have no idea what any of this is, right? So what's the first thing I'm gonna do? Well, if I'm not an introvert, I would give them a call. Now, if I am an introvert or I'm not feeling it right now, I'd probably bounce to another website. I'd go over here, I'd Google some more med spas near me or something, and I would go onto their website and see, can these guys solve my problem? So this presents multiple problems for the business, right? So one, there's no way for the prospect or the lead to get their question answered on the website, especially if they don't want to scroll through the website, they don't want to look through it, then there's also the problem of you have a lead on your website and there's no one capturing that lead, right? The person's on your website, he's right there, he's a warm lead because he wants something, but there's no way to capture that lead. So let's take a look at this chatbot quickly that I've built out. So here's a demo med spa website. So I'm going to refresh this page just to show you what this looks like. So you see the chat bubble and you see the pop-up here. Hello, I'm an AI assistant that can help you with your questions. How can I help you today? So if I click on this, I'm just going to start a new chat. And start a new chat. Here we go. So I clicked on it, pops up. Hey there, I'm here to assist you with any questions you might have. So let's say I'm looking for a double chin treatment, right? Hi, do you have anything for double chins? Let's see what it says. There we go. Yes, we offer Cabela treatments for double chins. Cabela is an injectable treatment that effectively reduces the appearance of fat and so forth. So, do you have any other questions? Let's say we do. We say yes. How may I be of help? All right, let's say, can you tell me how it works? There we go. This is just to show that it does track conversation history. So whatever the person says on the chatbot has context of that. So if you ask follow-up questions, it will know about it. So let's see what it said. So it works by using a bunch of technical stuff. So the treatment typically involves 2 to 6 injections over a 6-month period. Okay. So let's say, why is it done over 6 months? And this is just to show that you don't have to click on the buttons. You can just, some people won't see the buttons, so they can just type and it won't bomb out or anything. So there we go. It's done over a 6-month period to allow for gradual fat reduction and to give the body time to process and eliminate and destroy the destroyed fat cells effectively. Great. Would you like one of our consultants to get in touch with you to better assist you? And this is the lead capture step, right? Every 3 questions the person asks, if we haven't captured their details, they will get prompted. Something with a similar message. Like, would you like to leave your details so we can better assist you? And if I say yes, what you'll see is we have a form that pops up. And the cool thing about this is the chatbot's now locked down. They can't do anything else until they submit the form. This is obviously an optional thing. You don't have to do this, but this kind of makes it easier to capture the lead because they can't go and do something else or ask another question until they filled in the form. And there's some validations here. So let's see, if I go over to HubSpot quickly, I have this connected to HubSpot as the CRM. And I refresh this page. This is the context that we have right now. This is just a demo account. So we've just got 2 demo contacts here. So if I fill in some details, John at test.com, some test phone number, and let's say I am interested in a double chin treatment. Submit. Thank you for reaching out. One of our consultants will be in touch with you soon. Is there anything you'd like to ask? And then if we jump over to HubSpot quickly, I'm going to refresh this, and we have the lead captured right here. And as you can see, we've even got the message. I'm interested in a double chin treatment. Now somebody from the med spa business can ring them up or send them an email, whatever's preferred, and be like, hey, I see you're interested in double chin treatment. We have this Cabela treatment that can help with that. Can I book you in for an appointment? And that way you don't have a lead that's lost. People go onto this website and they don't just bounce off, right? Well, I mean, some will still obviously bounce off, but you'll at least capture a portion of the website visitors. So that's an advantage. Then they can just keep asking other questions here if they want to. Otherwise, if they're done, they can just say no, and the chatbot will say, appreciate the conversation, have a fantastic day. Done. So that's essentially a small demo of what this thing does. So let's jump in and take a look under the hood what this thing looks like. All right, so let's dive in and have a look at what this chatbot looks like under the hood. Just a note, this is going to get a little bit technical, so if there's any questions that you have or anything that doesn't quite make sense, feel free to leave a comment down below, and then I'll do my best to answer your questions. All right, so there's 2 main parts to this chatbot. So we're going to be using VoiceFlow as the chatbot front end. So that's going to be this piece right here. It's fully customizable, where the form pops up, the buttons, everything. That's all controlled by VoiceFlow. Then we're going to be using Flowise as the backend. So Flowise looks like this, and Flowise essentially controls the logic with how the user's query interacts with the large language model. In this case, we're using ChatGPT, the 4.0 mini model. So essentially, a user would type something into this chatbot. This chatbot would then send it over using an API to Flowise. Flowise would then take that query, process it accordingly, generate a response, and send it back to VoiceFlow, which is what's going to be displayed right here. So that's, if you recall, when we asked, do you guys have any double chin treatments? That then goes to Flowise. Flowise reads the question, generates a response, sends it back, and then it's displayed here in VoiceFlow. So that's essentially high level what this looks like. By the way, the templates to VoiceFlow and Flowise and all the code and everything I'm going to be using is going to be down below in the down in the description is what I'm trying to say. So links will be there if you guys want to download it and use it. It's there for you to use. So let's dive into this. So first thing, what we're going to be doing in VoiceFlow is setting a few variables, right? So we have chat history. That's used to track when the user speaks to the chatbot, the user's message, and the chatbot's response. Then you don't necessarily have to worry about this string chat history. This is just to process that chat history, put it into the correct format so that we can send it to Flowise in an API. Then we have questions asked and details captured. So questions asked, every time the user asks a question, it will be incremented. In other words, 1 question asked, it'll be set to 1. 2 questions asked, it'll be set to 2. Then 3. Once it hits 3, we are going to hit this step right here called should we show ad. If there's 3 or more questions asked and the details have not yet been captured, meaning the user hasn't gone through the form yet and clicked submit, we're going to prompt them with something like, would you like one of our consultants to get in touch with you to better assist you? And then we've got 2 buttons, a yes and a no. If the person says yes, We then set the questions asked to 0, and then we send them to this capture details step. And if I zoom out here quickly, just to kind of circle back to the start of the chatbot, so we set these variables, we greet the user, we give them the main menu with the Contact Us button. And if they click this button, it's the same thing as if they say yes to, they would like one of our consultants to get in touch with them. This then sends them to this capture details step, which is the exact same step over here, which does something in VoiceFlow called a custom action. By the way, if you guys aren't familiar with VoiceFlow, I'd highly recommend going to their YouTube channel and watching some intro videos. There's quite a few things that the system can do. It's super powerful. If you learn it, you can build some really cool stuff. So this custom action essentially runs a piece of code on the website, which I'll show you in a moment here. And that piece of code is the code that generates the form. And then once that form is filled out and submitted, this returns some data to this step. Then we go to this step where we process that data. And that data is the same data that is in the form. So the name, email, phone number, and the message. Then from this step, we go to this API step, where we actually go ahead and create the contact in HubSpot. A lot of people use something like make.com for this, or N8N or Zapier, and that's very, very valid to use that, especially if you're doing some more complex steps. The reason why I chose to do it this way is because it's a very simple request. We're just creating a contact. And this way we don't have to pay for any additional softwares, because if you use Make, there's a very small fee, like it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, but you pay for each operation, if I'm not mistaken. Same thing with Zapier and N8N, but they have their own pricing models. In any case, that was my logic in doing it this way. It takes a little bit more technical knowledge to be able to do it this way, but it works. In any case, once this contact is created, we set details captured to 1, meaning we've captured the user's details. And what that means is, if the user keeps chatting to the chatbot, we won't keep prompting them to leave their details because we know they've already left them. So we already have them in our CRM, whatever we choose to use, whether that's HubSpot or whatever. So in other words, they can just freely keep talking to the chatbot. So after we've captured their details, we tell them thank you for reaching out. And then we go to this ask another question step, which is right over here, which says, would you like to ask another question? If they say yes, we ask them, how can we help? If they say no, we end the conversation. And this is purely to be able to redirect them to something like this. Ask a question would put them back into the main menu, and it'll show them the Contact Us button so that they can click it and, like, if they want to leave their details. Then if they say no, we end the conversation. If they just decide to type in a question, we send them to the start of this whole step, which is, just to kind of zoom out and give you a better picture here, this whole step is where the logic happens that sends data to Flowise to generate a response to the user's query and display it to the user. So if we hop over here, so just to circle back from the main menu, they can either press Contact Us or they can type in a question. If they type in a question, it sends them down here. Anytime they ask a question, it sends them down here. Now we check, is the conversation chat ID empty? And what that is, if I hop over into Flowise quickly, and we go here, view messages, that is this ID right here. And that is the ID in Flowise that identifies a conversation chain. So in other words, if I ask a question, we need to tell, well, if I ask a question and ask a follow-up question, we need to tell Flowise that that is still the same conversation. We haven't started a brand new conversation. And how we do that is by sending this session ID back to Flowise, telling it, hey, this is still the same conversation. So if the user asks, how do I get rid of a double chin? And then they get an answer and they say something like, can you tell me more about how this works? In a brand new conversation, the chatbot will be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But if it's the same conversation, it'll know that you're asking about that double chin question that you've just asked. So in any case, that's the reason for that. So if this is empty, that just means it's a brand new conversation. If it's empty, we do a request to Flowise, which looks like this. We give it a question and the history. And if you remember, at the very beginning, we initialize the history. And there's steps over here which keep track of the history. You don't need to worry too much about that if you're just going to use it as is. Obviously, if you're a little bit more on the technical side, you can go into these things and customize them however you'd like. So if there's no if there's no chat ID, it's a brand new conversation, then we just send a request with a question. If there is a chat ID, we just send the chat ID. That's the reason for these two blocks here. Like I said, you don't have to worry too much about it if you're just going to use it as is. Otherwise, there are ways to modify these things and play around with them. So after that happens, we update some variables and we essentially just update the conversation history and the questions asked here, so we can keep track of that. We display the response to the user, and then we're back here where we check, has the user asked 3 or more questions, and have we captured their details? If they've asked 3 or more questions and we haven't captured their details, prompt them to leave their details. If they've asked 3 or more questions and they have left their details, ignore that. If it's less than 3 questions, also ignore that, and then just ask them if they'd like to ask another question. That's essentially it on the front end part. So just to kind of dive into this custom action, what this does is we have this custom action called capture form, and I'm going to leave a link down in the description to this. So I've created it just here with this medspa chatbot.html, and you can copy this as is. So all this does is it checks this trace.type, is it capture form, or trace.payload.name, is it capture form. And if we jump back here, this is where we specify that capture form. So if we hop back over to this, what we're going to do is we're going to generate the form. And this is that form that we saw with the name, email, phone number, and message. These are all defined here. Then there's some additional steps here that you can get rid of if you'd like. So basically over here, well, let me hop over here. So you'll notice here, if I go and inspect this, there are multiple things here. There is a message box and there's a button. And all we're doing, if I jump back here, all we're doing is dynamically accessing this chat input and this chat input button. And we're saying, if we're displaying the form, disable these. Disable the message box and the button. And then once the form has been submitted, we're re-enabling this. So if you don't want these two to be disabled when the form is displayed, meaning that the lead can just ignore the form, they can just keep typing, then all you do is you would comment out this piece right here, and you would comment out this piece right here. And then you should be good to go with that. But essentially all this is doing is generating the form. Once the form is active, it will disable the message box and the button. And then once the form's submitted, it will re-enable the message box and the button so that the user can type in more questions. Then it'll also pass these variables to VoiceFlow. So if you have a look here, so we process that, well, we capture the data. We then go to this step right here, where we're looking at last event.payload.name, email, phone, and message. And if you notice here, we've got name, email, phone, and message, and that's what we're passing back to VoiceFlow. And that's how we're able to access it. And just to give you some more kind of visual on what that looks like, here's an example form data that we send back to VoiceFlow, and this is what we access. The type is complete, meaning the event's done. Then the payload, here name, email, phone, message, that is right here, and that's exactly what we're accessing. Then once we have that, we then go to this create HubSpot contact, and we're sending this request to HubSpot to create a contact. When you use this template, just remember to go to the variables. If I go back here, variables, all you'll have to do is change this HubSpot auth token to use your own token. And remember to keep bearer space and whatever token HubSpot gives you. And just so you know how to do that, if I go to HubSpot, you go to the settings here, you go into integrations, private apps. So here's my app. You would create a new private app, call it whatever you like. Go to scopes. If you want to be able to create contacts, you'll have to go to CRM, and you want this CRM object contacts. You'll need read and write. And if I create this app, say continue creating, then this will be your token. You'd click show token, you'd click copy, you'd go back here and you'd say bearer space and then whatever the token is. And then you should be able to use it that way if you're going to be using HubSpot. You can always use something else like Airtable or Salesforce or whatever is appropriate. So that is it on the Flowise side. Like I said, if you guys have any other questions or if there's anything that I kind of skimmed over that you'd like me to go into a little bit more detail, let me know. I'm happy to do more of a deep dive into this. So let's hop over onto Flowise. So Flowise, if you want to, so you'll have to set up Flowise yourself, like on your local or on a server somewhere in the cloud. And how you would do that, I'm going to link this down in the description. This is Get Started guide from Flowise. So if you're on a Mac, you would just say npm install-g Flowise. It's possible that this might work on a Windows. I haven't tried it myself, so let me know. Then you'd say npx Flowise start once that's done, and then you can just go to localhost 3000, and that'll open up Flowise for you. Then I will give you guys this template. You can just import this on your side. What you'll have to do is a few things here. So let's just take a quick look at how this works. So you have this conversational retrieval QA chain. This is essentially what does the prompting for you. Well, maybe that's not a good way to put it. It's what ties everything together. So we have a chat model. That means what large language model are we using? In this case, I'm using the GPT-4o mini model from ChatGPT, and I have an OpenAI API key here. So you'll have to go sign up for one on OpenAI's website. Once you have that, you can just click Create New, give it a name, put your API key in here, and then select it here, and you're basically done. We have a few settings here, like what model do we want to use. There's a few different models available here. Temperature is basically how creative do you want this model to be? Like, do you want it to be able to come up with better responses, or do you want it to follow exactly what you said? The lower the temperature, like if it's closer to 0, it'll try to be more factual. And the higher the temperature, it'll try to be more creative with its responses. Then that's the one input here, the chat model. The other one is the vector store retriever. So there's a few things here. All right, we've got Pinecone, and Pinecone is what's called the vector database. And that is what stores the data that we feed to the chatbot for it to generate a response to the user's query. And we can take a look at that here in a moment. So this vector database needs input, right? And what I mean by that, if I go to this conversational retrieval QA chain and I hit additional parameters, we have a few things happening here. So this is the main prompt that we use to actually generate a response. I want you to act as a document that I am having a conversation with. Your name is AI Assistant. Using the provided context, answer the user's question to the best of your ability using the resources provided. And this is essentially what's called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. And all that means is that we're generating a response, and that response is enriched using data retrieval. And this data that we're retrieving is whatever we're using as context to the chatbot. In this case, we've taken a MedSpa's website and we've scraped that information, and we're using that to generate responses. So if we go further here, if there is nothing in the context relevant to the question at hand, just say, you can email our team or alternatively reach out via the Contact Us page, and they will be able to assist you further with that. And stop after that. Refuse to answer any question not about the info. Never break character. And this context right here is the data that we're giving this chatbot to answer the question with, right? So we're going to tell it something like, the user has asked this question, then we're going to give it this prompt, and this context is what we're taking from the database, the information from the database that best matches the user's question, like the information that the system has identified will be the most relevant to that question. So if we backtrack here a little bit, we are using this Apify website content crawler. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. So what you'll have to do as well is go onto their website, Apify, create an account and generate an API key. I think they give you $5 free credits. Then what you do is you specify a URL here. Can't actually expand this, but anyway, you specify a URL here, then you choose a crawler type. I'm using this stealthy web crawler, and what this essentially does is if I understand this correctly, I might have this completely wrong, but this is my idea of it. It essentially loads the website up as you would in a browser, and it scrolls through it and it grabs the information from it. Now, the reason why that's relevant, you can use something like Cheerio Web Scraper, which is free, but what's going to happen if I hop into Pinecone here, and this is the database that we're using for this chatbot. So if you see the chunks, so it pulls the information and it splits it up, right? If I go back here, we've got the HTML to Markdown text splitter. So we're splitting it into chunks of 1,000 characters. So we'll take a page, let's say it's 10,000 characters long. We're going to split it up by 1,000 each. And then we're going to make sure that the first chunk is going to have 200 characters, the last 200 that overlap with the next chunk. That way the chunks kind of overlap so that when you retrieve relevant data, it kind of has context of each other. So once that apologies, I'll give that again. So once we pull that data from the website, if we use the Cheerio Web Scraper, it's going to actually pull the HTML data, which when we go to our vector database, the data is clean right now, which is very good for the chatbot, because it gets clean data that it can process, and it's relevant data. It's not like a bunch of HTML tags and JavaScript code and stuff and slashes and all sorts of nonsense, which like a normal web scraper would pull. So that's why I like using this one. It gives you very clean data. So once that is done, it stores it in Pinecone. You'll also have to sign up for a Pinecone account, and you'll create an index, which if I go back here, you'll just say create index. And then here, this is some important information. You have to choose a model, and this is an embeddings model. This is essentially another model that encodes the data in such a way that we can retrieve it in a relevant manner, if I understand that correctly. So we use this OpenAI embeddings. There are many different kinds of embeddings, many different providers. I use this one. I'm not entirely sure if there's other advantages to using different ones. I use this text embeddings 3 model, I haven't done enough research into this to really know the difference between these. But anyway, you would need an OpenAI API key. You connect this up to this Pinecone database, and then this web scraper, it will get the data. This OpenAI embeddings node will encode it, and then it will store it in the Pinecone database. So when you create your Pinecone, they call it an index, you give it a name, and then you enter the dimensions. You can also set it up by the model, and that model will correspond to what you have here. So we're using the text embedding 3 small model. So if I go here, I click setup by model, I will just click this model, text embedding 3 small. Set configuration, and we're done here. Then we'll leave all of this the same and just click create index. I don't think it's letting me create one now because I'm on the starter plan. I'm assuming that, oh, I need to give it a name. So if I click test, I'll click create index, and that's done. Then I'll have an index, you take its name, and you put it here. And then you're essentially done on that step. The other thing that you would require is upstash, which is the memory management. So that'll essentially store the conversation. Like if I say, hey, I'm looking for a double chin treatment, I'll get a response. Upstash is going to be storing all of that. Then I'll say, can you tell me more about that? Get a response. Upstash stores all of that so that the chatbot has context of that history. If you're just testing out, you can always use, I think it's called, it's under memory, I think it's buffer memory. You can always use this node, and you can just connect it up, and that'll just use your computer's RAM for that. Obviously, if you're doing like a production system, or you're deploying it somewhere in the cloud, you'd need to use something else, because if your chatbot gets spammed or you run out of memory, the whole thing is going to break and it's not going to look very good. So with Upstash, you would need to create an account, create an API key or a credential. There's a guide here that you can follow on that. Then you'd need the Upstash Redis REST URL, which you should be able to find when you create that account. Once you have all of that, you can just plug everything in. And the other thing that you would need, because this is running on your local, right? So if I click here, you can embed this somewhere, but in this case, we're using, if we go back to Flowise, we're using an API endpoint to access this. And if you see, I'm using ngrok, which is like a system that you install on your local, which takes a local URL and it exposes it to the internet. And the reason we have to do that is because Flowise is in the cloud, it cannot access this localhost 3000 because it's stored on your local computer. It's not exposed to the internet. So what you would do is you would go, and I'm going to leave a link to this in the description as well. You'd install this ngrok software. There's a guide for Macs, for Mac, for Linux, and for Windows. So you install it. You'd have to create an account here, which will give you a token that you can use. It's completely free. There's obviously paid plans, but you can use it for free. Then you run something like this, ngrok HTTP, and then you tell it what endpoint you want it to expose. So in the case of Flowise, this is what you want to expose. Then what you would do, as soon as it gives you a URL, this is what it looks like, and it's going to tell you forwarding, and this is the URL. That if you send a request to that URL, it's going to go to this on your local. So you would take this right here and you would append this to it. And that is where you send your requests to in order for Flowise to pick it up, if you have Flowise set up on your local. If you're setting it up in the cloud, that's a whole different story. There are guides on Flowise's website on how to do that. But for testing purposes, this is how you'd go about it. There's probably better ways to do it. Let me know. This is just how I've done it. I'm just sharing what I've learned basically. So once you have ngrok set up, that's essentially it. Then you can set up authentication with it as well. just make sure that when you use this template, these two blocks right here, just replace this with your own URL. And this will be up until here, whatever ngrok gives you. And the rest of this is going to be whatever Flowise gives you here. So that'll be the endpoint that you have to send data to. Then the only other thing I will also share with you is this CSS template. So you download this. Then if I pull up my code editor, this is essentially the site. So what I use, so just to backtrack, you download this, you unzip it, and you open it in VS Code or whatever code editor you use. Then you would need an extension. I use this live server, and with this live server, if I hit this button here, go live, it's going to essentially launch the site for me. And there we go. Then this code, if I go back to this gist, you would take this code, just make sure that you use your own Flowise project ID specified over here, and you get that by, once you've created a chatbot here in Flowise, if you go integration, web chat, and there's your project ID. So you would take this and you would plug it in here. Then you can take this whole piece of code like that. Then you go to that CSS template and it's going to be in your index.html. I already have it here, but you'd go to just before this last HTML tag. Basically, it's going to look like this. In index.html, you're going to go here after this body tag and you're going to paste it in. Once that's done, you would be able to access it like that. So the reason it looks like this right now is because I don't have a project ID. Once I have a project ID, it'll pick up my specific chatbot. So that's essentially it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below in the comments if you have any questions or if there's anything else that you want me to do a deep dive on. And yeah, if this video was helpful to you, leave a like. It really helps the channel. I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks.